former broadcast partner of Madden's, Mr. Al Michaels. Al, first of all, thank you so much for being here. I'm sure there's a lot of things that are happening right now and, a lot of emotions that you're experiencing. So what were your initial thoughts when you heard the news about his death yesterday?
I was surprised. I knew that, John had not been in the greatest of health, but I just am choosing today to just think about the great times. And there were so many, and I'm seeing the love that's being accorded to John universally in today's world. I mean, how many people are beloved by 99 to 99.5% of the people in this country? And I think John fit that bill. And I think of him as one of a kind. He created a new template in the world of broadcasting for certain, and he's a unicorn. And I just think back, and I have so many fantastic memories that are just flowing through my head and have been all night long, and thinking about the great times that I have had and so many people have had with the great John.
Al, Marcus Spears, man, I was fortunate to meet you years ago and have a good conversation with you and really understand who you were outside of the broadcast booth. Obviously, I knew you from that, but Al, tell us a little bit about John the man. We know him as the broadcaster, as the coach. We know him as Madden, attributed to the video game. But you had intimate moments. You were able to spend time with John Madden, the man. Who was he as a man?
Marcus, he was so much more than football. And people think of him as the big guy, and he's, in the commercials, he's coming through the wall and doing all that crazy stuff that he did. And he loved that in the commercials that he did. And he knew football inside out, obviously. But I think back to all of the great conversations that I've had with John, and the dinners and the lunches and the breakfasts, where we talked about everything but football. And I think the one thing that a lot of people don't know about John is he was close to being a Renaissance man. He was interested in everything. He was extremely well read. He would go around the country in that bus, and we call that flyover country. And for those of us who live on either coast, you fly over the rest of the country. John drove through it. John would go to coffee shops in Kearney, Nebraska, and in Goodland, Kansas, and he was accessible. And he would sit with the people, and he'd laugh with the people. And so many people around the country have said, we just shared this fantastic experience with this larger-than-life man who would get off the bus and engage us in a conversation for an hour. So I think of John, and I think of John as a guy who observed everything. He was very curious. He was very interested in everything that went on around him. And to me, those are the best of the memories for me.
Yeah, you called him a Renaissance man. I was wondering what of those interests is most surprising to you. What was the title of the book that you were shocked that he was reading, or something that he brought up that you were like, what?
He would read everything. I mean, newspapers, magazines, books, you name it. And of course, once we got to the internet, that as well. But John would just he would just focus on whatever was in the moment at that time. What was the big thing in the world or in the country, and he could discuss it. But also, Dominic, he was a great listener too. He loved to listen to people, to get engaged in the conversations with people, to hear other people's point of view. The first time I met John was, believe it or not, back in 1975. I did some regional games for CBS that year. One of my games was New Orleans at Oakland, and I was doing the San Francisco Giants at the time, living in the Bay Area, went across the Bay, met with John in his office, and we talked about football for a few minutes, and then we talked about Travels with Charlie, which was the classic Steinbeck book, where he travels across the country with his dog. And John said, this is something I'd like to do someday. So I'm not sure John put the dog in the bus, but John lived Steinbeck's dream.
Well, Al, it seems like you have so many great memories with John, but is there one in particular that really sticks out in your mind, something that you'd say would define your relationship with him?
Charlie, there are so many. He had a fantastic sense of humor. He was so curious as to how things work. And one night we're having dinner in Green Bay, and I don't like any vegetables at all, but I love broth, and I love croutons, and I love cheese. So we're in a restaurant in Green Bay, and I order French onion soup without the onions, which of course John now broke into a belly laugh, and then had to he had to bring the chef out because they actually brought it to me, and he had to know, how do you make French onion soup without the onions? And only John could make a whole scene out of that. It was like something out of Seinfeld.
Oh my goodness.
Al, listen, man. Hey, I know. Like I've been a guy that people talk about. Like you just crazy. Like you out there. You do things sometimes that nobody understand. And I think what encapsulated John Madden, especially in the booth, because to be honest with you, Al, growing up, I just wanted to watch the football games. But his voice and the tone of his voice and listening to him talk about things other than football during an actual broadcast. Were there ever times where producers was like, John, let's get back to the game, or like let's hurry up so we can start talking about football? Or was he just given that leeway because that's who he was as far as a person and a broadcaster?
Marcus, he had all the rope he wanted, right? Nobody was going to stop John.
No.
And nobody wanted to stop John, because when John would get off on one of those things, you just wanted to hear even more of it. And you know what you saw,
Yes.
he was so genuine. And a lot of guys come off the field or off the sideline and into the booth, and then they have to think about, well, what am I supposed to sound like? And it's a new thing for them. But with John, you got John. That's who he was. He wasn't anybody
Yeah.
else on the air. He wasn't a different person. And he was able to, I always felt that one of the great things about John is he was a great communicator. He knew how to
Mhm.
talk to people, to break complicated things down, make them interesting, make them funny. And when John would get excited and excitable, which was the kind of man that he was, that
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming, sports, and premium content, subscribe to ESPN Plus.